All right. Charlie Burris, Zach Reagan, the A to Z Sports Big Orange podcast. A little bit of a special edition tonight because the NCAA tournament bracket was just revealed. Tennessee, a 2-seed, as we all suspected. I think even if they won today, I'm not sure one was ever an option, and I can go be bitter about that somewhere else, I guess. But we are going to talk about we're going to talk about what happened with Florida today. We're going to talk about what happened with Auburn before the Florida game. And then, of course, Tennessee's draw in the NCAA tournament. It's going to be a good one. What is up, Zach?
Man, interesting weekend, right? For Tennessee sports all the way around from basketball to baseball. But you never know how these tournaments are going to go. And this one was certainly fun. And Tennessee fans were wrapped up in it for 3 straight days. There was no early exit this year around like last year. And I guess we'll find out if that was a good thing or a bad thing here coming up next week.
Yeah, I said at this, I texted this to y'all. At this point, Tennessee is a little bit of the Buffalo Bills of the SEC basketball tournament. You know, Buffalo Bills made it to however many Super Bowls, never won any of them. I guess Tennessee did. You did win the one SEC tournament. That's true. But is Barnes now 1-5 in the SEC title game? Is that right?
It's rough. Yeah, it's
either way. Fact is, Florida was a better team today, and frankly, Florida is probably the best team in America. But we're going to talk about every single bit of that and the good news. Tony Vitello always coming through to save us. So they sweep Florida this weekend, and D1 baseball will finally have to face their mortality, and they will have to rank Tennessee number 1 this week, I assume. maybe not. I guess LSU didn't lose, but LSU played Missouri. So that's going to be the show tonight. This is the stand-in for the podcast this week. Usually we're Mondays at 6 p.m. if you want to watch regularly. And you know, what I usually say, A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed. Find us there. Subscribe. A to Z Sports Tennessee Volunteers on YouTube. Hit the notification bell so you're notified when we go live. And with that said, let's get right to it right after I tell you about Zen Sports. It is March, and you know that Zen Sports is having another amazing sweepstakes. This time, the VIP Players Club sweepstakes is coming in with the big bucket club sweepstakes. Sorry, it's kind of too layered there. The big bucket club sweepstakes this month. One grand prize earns a $10,000 bonus bet on the NCAA championship game, or $5,000 cash. 20 small prize winners earn a $100 bonus bet on the NCAA championship game, or $50 cash. Earn entries on every bet you place in March and earn 10 times entries on parlay wagers. Plus, if you sign up, and make your first bet with code A2ZTN, that is ATOZTN, you'll earn 500 bonus entries into the big bucket sweepstakes. Go to zensports.com/sweepstakes for the full list of rules, and you'll also earn the $100 no danger first wager that we've talked about for so long. Zen Sports betting just got better. If you have a gambling problem, 1-800-889-9789. Must be 21 or older and located in Tennessee. $5 minimum wager to qualify for entry. Terms and conditions apply. No danger wager limited to plus 500 odds to qualify. Qualifying wager for a wager entry must have minimum odds for any leg of minus 250 or worse. American odds for clarity minus 250 does not qualify. Zen Sports. Go download it. No better time than now to get in on the action. Than the NCAA tournament. I mean, frankly, the craziest time of year, not just to watch sports, but definitely to bet on it, no doubt. All right. Tennessee goes to Nashville, and in the first round disposes of Texas pretty easily. I think we can kind of skip over that one. It was consequential, I guess, in the fact that Rick Barnes may have put nearly a nail in Rodney Terry's coffin, although Texas did make the tournament just barely. They're in a play-in game against Xavier. So maybe Rodney Terry doesn't get fired. I feel like he still is gonna, especially if I think the Xavier game is probably his do or die there, but I don't think Rick Barnes did Rodney any favors, even though Rodney's coached for Rick for like 10 years. And so that's tough, but it was a relatively easy win. Tennessee kind of went wire to wire. And then you moved on to the Auburn game. This one, very meaningful just because it was against Bruce, and Tennessee played one of its best games of the season, laid down the law. really had an incredible second half and just an awesome, tough, gritty effort out of everybody on the floor. We could start there, Zach, because it was so nice to beat Bruce. Oh my gosh, what a cathartic moment. But how are you feeling about that one before we move on to what we saw today?
Well, we knew from earlier in the season when Tennessee almost beat Auburn at Auburn that they were right there with Auburn. Everything people say about Auburn, you say about Tennessee too, because it feels like they're just equally talented. Either team can win anytime those teams match up. I thought the biggest thing about that game on Saturday, though, was, late in the second half, it looked like Tennessee was on the verge of giving that one away. Auburn grabbed some momentum there late in the second half, and it's like, oh, here we go. Here we go. How are they going to lose this game type deal? And, they battled. They hit their free throws. They hit some big shots, and they were able to come away with the win. And that was a huge win. Because I felt like Auburn really wanted that game. I felt like the way they were playing, they were playing to win. And Janai Broome is just he's so tough to handle inside. He's almost impossible to guard. They kind of let him. I don't want to say they let him do whatever. I don't want to make that sound like an excuse. He's a really good player, but it's hard to guard somebody like that when there's that much contact allowed from the offensive player, and you're really not allowed to reciprocate in any way if you're the defender. And that's just kind of college basketball in a nutshell. But to hang on and win that game, I thought was huge. And like you said, beating Bruce, always nice. That's huge, especially in the SEC tournament in Nashville too. I think that makes it even better. That shows you going into this tournament, regardless of what happened against Florida, and Tennessee can play with anybody. They really
Absolutely.
can. And if Auburn is the number one, overall seed, despite losing 3 out of 4 to end the season, but if that's the team that you're saying is the best team in the country right now, which is debatable, Tennessee beat them, in their last game. So I think that says a lot about where Tennessee's at too.
Yeah, I think at this point we can kind of meld the conversation about the Auburn and Florida games here and a little bit of the NCAA draw, because Auburn got the number 1 overall seed. If I'm the committee, that's the wrong selection. I guess it should be Duke, although if they have Cooper Flag, it shouldn't be them either. It should be Florida.
Yeah.
Florida down the stretch, which the final stretch for them included winning at Alabama, and they also won at Auburn. It was further back in the season, but they beat both of those teams, and they are playing at a level right now that I didn't think they were capable of. I didn't think that this team it was good. I think we knew preseason that Florida was going to be pretty good, but they weren't picked anywhere really close to the top of the SEC. And I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember. Maybe they were top half, top 5, but definitely not number 1. And they are so balanced and so lengthy. Their backcourt is elite. Their front court doesn't have one single just elite guy that'll take you to the woodshed. But as a unit all together, they just strangle you out. It's balanced in just so well. And I think Florida, I have good friends who are Florida fans, and I think they're shocked by how that team has come into form here. And when I look at it, realistically speaking, they would beat Duke. They did beat Auburn. They would especially beat Duke without Cooper Flag, and they would beat Houston too. That was the way that they played today to get to that game now, your SEC championship game. I thought Tennessee had a chance, but I thought Florida was probably going to win, just tried to be a realist going in. And Tennessee made a nice little run in that second half after getting behind in the first. And Florida just had an answer for absolutely everything. Clayton Jr., it's clutch shot after clutch shot after clutch shot. And if it's not him, it's Condon down low. And it's not – they just come at you in waves, man. And I have to give it up to Florida. They put together a really good basketball team. It makes me absolutely sick to my stomach to have to acknowledge that, but it is what it is with this Florida team. They are playing that good right now. They put together that good of a season, and so now you didn't beat them, and there's no shame in that at all whatsoever. You got to beat Bruce on the way. And so now you have your NCAA draw. I mean, I don't know if you want to speak to what happened against Florida today, Zach, before we get into the draw, but just my general take was just those guys are really freaking good, man.
I was sitting here looking at the stats while you were talking, and it felt like Florida hit way more threes today than they actually did. Have you looked at the box score for that game?
No, not really. Yeah.
Did it not feel like to you that Florida outshot Tennessee from beyond the arc? I mean, it felt like
for sure.
To me.
I mean, they just kept hitting them like it was all in big spots. Their threes were meaningful.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Tennessee was 8 of 26. Florida was 9 of 27. So barely even a difference. It just, I don't know. I guess when they really needed it, and when Tennessee had some momentum, they hit threes to stop that momentum. But really, the story of the game was the offensive rebounds, out rebounding Tennessee 15-5 on the offensive side. I mean, it's hard to win against a team like Florida doing that. And what do you do if you're Tennessee? Because, like you mentioned, the size that they have in the front court, the length, it's really hard to combat that. It's, I think Tennessee can. Obviously, they beat Florida in Knoxville. If they meet again, I mean, it's going to be a tough matchup. It'd obviously be in the championship, maybe, or the Final Four. I'm not sure how that would play out, but Tennessee can beat them, but I would lean towards Florida winning that matchup again if they meet, just because the matchups there started in Tennessee's favor, and I don't see them suddenly out rebounding Florida in a tournament game. So that's kind of disheartening, but that's the big takeaway from that game for me.
I mean, Florida is not unbeatable. In the last, was it a little more than 2 weeks ago, they did lose to Georgia. At Georgia, but still they lost to Georgia, and Georgia is not a world beater by any means. Tennessee kicked Georgia's teeth in Thompson Bowling, so they can be beaten. But it does feel like the way that they are gelling and just the way that team has come together, it's gonna take a little bit of a freak performance from somebody to take them down and have them not make a Final Four at least. And that's tough. I can't stand it. I don't want anything good for Florida.
No.
And especially not the coach, and everything there is just gross. But at the same time, I have to be as real as I possibly can be. They are the best team in America right now. And I think anybody that's being honest with themselves would say the same. Auburn has kind of crumbled here. I think they've shown weaknesses. I think their backcourt is young with Pettiford.
And Pettiford did not play that well.
Oh, he was terrible against Tennessee.
Yeah.
And it's hard to have a good game against Sakai Ziegler. To his credit, everybody struggles against Sakai Ziegler. But they don't have the elite backcourt that Florida does. Chad Baker-Mazar is a liability. And then they can go to Janai Broome. They really feel like, what that Auburn team feels like a lot is that 2019 Tennessee team with Grant and Admiral. And Tennessee, I mean, it was automatic points with Grant, and he was so good. And kind of similarly, Grant always got a pretty favorable whistle, and Janai Broome gets a favorable whistle, and some stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it wasn't as balanced as you needed it to be. You get got by stupid. I guess in that one it was Purdue, with the year before it was Loyola Chicago. And, it feels like they're going to potentially have some vulnerabilities in the tournament. Maybe it's another Final Four for Bruce. Who knows? But just my general take on those two games. Florida's your best team. You just lost the best team in America.
Yeah.
And it's tough that you couldn't grab an SEC championship in that spot. You're playing some of your best basketball of the season right now, and that's really good. And we're going to get into what that means for the tournament here in a second. But just dang it, why?
I mean, maybe. I mean, I think part of that is Tennessee had a much tougher. I won't say the matchup was necessarily tougher, but the way the game played out with Tennessee and Auburn was tougher than what Florida went through on Saturday. And we saw it after the last time Tennessee played Auburn. It felt like that. I think Kentucky was the next game after they played Auburn, and they didn't play well. And we talked then about just how much effort and energy that playing Auburn takes out of you. And that kind of felt like maybe that played into it a little bit. I mean, not taking anything away from Florida. Like you said, they're the best team in the country right now, and they deserve to win that game. But that certainly didn't make it any easier for Tennessee today.
No doubt. So, with all of that said, let's get into the actual bracket draw that Tennessee has. There's a million things to talk about across this with all of the different matchups, but concentrating on Tennessee only. The number one seed in Tennessee's bracket is Houston, who, if you were listening to our last show, I kind of said, I don't know that I want to have Houston in that bracket. Can Tennessee beat Houston? Sure. Absolutely. Tennessee could beat Houston. I think Alabama beat them earlier in the year. And it's not that Tennessee plays a similar game to Alabama, but Tennessee beat Alabama. And by kind of logic there, Tennessee's beat a lot of really good teams. I think they could take down Houston. But if that ended up being the Elite Eight game, it's just going to be ugly.
Mm-hmm.
Houston, I think as of right now, let's look at live KenPom all the way through. Tennessee and Houston have kind of switched places as number 1 and number 2 in defense all season long. Tennessee dropped to number 3, actually. Houston's number 2, and the St. John's, the Johnnies taking over number 1 defensive spot. I guess that's classic Patino, is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So St. John's is actually number 1 now. They just won the Big East, and that may God have mercy on the soul of the teams that have to play them as a 2 seed. After they are like 29-4 and coached by an absolute legend.
Yeah, if there's one silver lining, and we don't know what would have happened if Tennessee would have won today, but I think logically, I know we agree, and most Tennessee fans agree, and just logically, the right thing to do would have been to make the winner of the game today the last number 1 seed, because you've talked about the SEC being so tough this season, and the line this week was the SEC tournament Final Four is going to be tougher than the actual Final Four, next month in April. So if you win that tournament and you were a top 5 team, if it would have been different if like Texas would have came out and won it or something. But if you're Florida or Tennessee coming into that game, it felt like the winner should earn that number 1 seed. And if you would have, then you would have probably been in the bracket with St. John's. And I think you would take what Tennessee has over. I would rather play Houston than St. John's, I think. What about you? Would you prefer that matchup?
Yes, I would. It is tough, I guess, because Houston is coached by Kelvin Sampson, who also, is borderline legendary coach, has made Final Fours at multiple schools, including Houston. And so there was never going to be any kind of a cakewalk for Tennessee here. At some point, you're going to have to beat an elite team. Very, very rarely do you get that opportunity. Crazily, that Loyola Chicago year, I think if you beat them in that Sweet 16, you would have played Kansas State in the Elite Eight. And so sometimes you do get goofy draws like that where you would have had no elite team standing between you and a Final Four. And it does still make me want to throw up thinking about that. But the chances are that's not going to happen. Usually it's going to be what happened last year. You end up running into the number 1 seed because they're great. And Edey was too much for you. This is a better matchup than Purdue was ever going to be for Tennessee last year. And I think when you look at the metrics, Tennessee is, like I said, by the metrics. I know Tennessee fans really loved the way that Dalton Knecht played, but when you truly break it down, this team is technically better than last year. Knecht made it much more exciting and a little more palatable, I guess, if that's the right word, because he would score in bunches and be so exciting and fun, and you don't really have that guy except on those games where Lanier goes off. But it's still, this team on balance, on the whole, is technically better than last year. And I think Houston is probably looking and going, crap, man, Tennessee's really good. Like that's a tough draw.
Nobody wants to play Tennessee. I'm sure plenty of teams think they can beat Tennessee, but nobody's going to be like, oh man, yes, we get to go play Tennessee. Yeah. They know what kind of game it's going to be. But
breaking down what Tennessee has here, let's get into that. Outside of just,
it's rich with storylines.
Yes, without a obviously so far we're assuming Tennessee will make it pretty far in the tournament and some of the conversations that we're having. Let's start small. So Tennessee plays Wofford. Please, Lord, let's hope.
Yeah, we'll have some different conversations if
right
if they run into trouble there.
Exactly. And so let's say you move past Wofford, then it's either one of UCLA or Utah State. UCLA, that's an interesting game given
Barnes history.
People forget that Barnes wanted to go to UCLA and ultimately didn't. He got $5 million a year from Tennessee to not.
Yeah, UCLA wouldn't pay his buyout at Tennessee, I think was the big holdup there, right?
Yes, and Tennessee should beat both of those teams. Let's be clear there. But that is an interesting storyline. And, UCLA and the Big Ten this year, anywhere beyond that top, really just that top two of Michigan State and Wisconsin, I personally have not been impressed at all. Admittedly, I will say, I haven't watched that much UCLA basketball. They were the number 4 team in the Big Ten, which is ahead of Wisconsin, who ultimately played in the championship game against Michigan. Michigan won the championship game today. After Michigan fell apart near the end of the year, then ended up winning the Big Ten tournament. It was odd. But, UCLA's had a good year, and it's not going to be easy, but maybe I'm out ahead of my skis there. I don't see that being much more challenging than, say, like that Texas game in the SEC tournament. I don't know if you have a different take there.
No, I mean, that feels like as tough as the SEC was this season, these first couple of rounds, or really the first 2 rounds, we'll get into the rest of it here in a minute. Those first 2 rounds and that second round game should be like playing a very bottom SEC team, not LSU or South Carolina, but one of those bottom teams that just got in the tournament. That's a tough matchup. They play hard, but you should win. I think if you lose one of those games, we're having some interesting conversations after that as well. If you lose in the second round,
I was trying to see. I hadn't looked at their full schedule. They lost 4 games in a row to begin Big Ten play, but then had a really nice stretch. They even beat Michigan State at home. I didn't recall that game, but that's an impressive win.
Michigan State though at times here under Izzo. I mean, we've talked about it before. They're great in the tournament, and I wouldn't be shocked if they're in the Final Four this year, just because that's what Tom Izzo kind of does. But they'll drop some games in the regular season under Izzo lately.
Yeah, but then the UCLA's last game was a nearly 20-point loss to Wisconsin. They lost 86-70 in the Big Ten tournament. Mick Cronin still coaching over there. That's who, instead of Barnes, that's who they ended up hiring. He's, a been there, done that, long time guy. And let's say, what if Utah State wins? And I have to take a step back and go, I haven't watched much of Utah State at all this season, and I wasn't going to be able to before this draw. I got to run with the information that I have. And so let's assume that UCLA is the team that makes it through there. But if not, obviously I like Tennessee's chances against Utah State too. So now for the Sweet 16, even more stuff here. I mean, we're getting comments. Jared asks, if we make it to the Sweet 16, would we play Kentucky? And Kyle feels like me here in the comments. Kyle says, I like the bracket because we have a chance to get back at Kentucky and Purdue. Kyle, I could not be more with you on that. So Illinois is your 6th seed, and then Texas and Xavier, who makes it through there. Your guess is as good as mine. But Tennessee already beat Illinois at Illinois this season. So you can beat them. And then Kentucky or Troy. Kentucky is the 3 seed. Troy is the 14. Assuming Kentucky doesn't blow it against a mega low seed, as they have multiple times in the last few years. And let's bring in the fact that Mark Pope has never once in his career won an NCAA tournament game. And the guy that took over for him at BYU actually had a better year than I think he had going out the door. I'd have to go back and look. But, not to cast aspersions, because Mark Pope beat Tennessee twice this year.
Yeah.
But I am the kind of person, and I don't think that I said this publicly. I might have said it on the podcast in the last few weeks. I want to see Kentucky again so badly. I cannot, to the deepest part of me, I cannot stand that Tennessee lost twice to Kentucky this year. And it makes me physically ill. Please give me Kentucky in the Sweet 16. And you may lose. It's a high-pressure spot. And if you lose, Kentucky fans will dunk on you, and they will dance on your grave, 100%. But if you beat them, you can say, kiss my butt. We made it to an Elite Eight. You stink. And it's the absolute greatest, and you get a third shot at Kentucky. Maybe you're not there with me, Zach. I know it's like a lot of people like to shy away from the more volatile spots like that. Bring it on. Give me these guys. I want to beat Kentucky again.
Yeah, well, after the last 5, 6, 7 years, I think we've learned that there is no easy path. Even when the path does look easy, it's really not. So that stuff kind of goes out the window in March Madness. I'm with you. It's hard to beat a team 3 times, especially a team that's better than you. So I don't, who knows what will actually happen. I was pretty confident about that Tennessee-Kentucky game the second time around, and it didn't go Tennessee's way. But you got to think that if they meet a third time, there's just no way that Kentucky's going to beat them a third time. And if you beat Kentucky in the Sweet 16, it feels like from there, I mean, look, yeah, you want to make a Final Four. This is a Final Four caliber team. But once you get past the Sweet 16 and it's the last 8 teams remaining, it's a toss-up. It can go any way, and you just don't know. And if you do lose in the Elite Eight to Houston or whoever makes it through to there, it would be kind of ending the season on a bit of a high note. It would still be disappointment, but if you're able to get revenge against Kentucky to get to your second straight Elite Eight, it's pretty impressive. It's not the goal.
Oh, yeah.
The goal is the Final Four. But I don't think you can be like fire Rick Barnes after, beating Kentucky in the Sweet 16 or something crazy like that. Like you can be disappointed, but I don't think there's anything to be mad about if you do that. You lose in the second round. I mean, again, that's different. Those are always disappointing if you're a 2 seed. But you get past Kentucky in the Sweet 16. That's a decent way to end the season if you don't advance past there.
I was correct. BYU got 3 wins better after getting rid of Mark Pope.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I said in our group text that BYU VCU matchup is a classic. You don't know who to pick. If you're filling out your bracket, you're probably gonna make the wrong choice somehow.
No doubt. But to me, that's very exciting. And the worst case scenario is you play a Texas team that you've already beaten like a drum. You play a Xavier team that has shown some promise and has a good coach.
Bubble team though, still.
But it's definitely a team you should beat, or it's Troy. And I think you should definitely feel good if you get to play Troy.
I don't know. That might be the one that scares you the most.
That's true. If they're the Loyola Chicago that miraculously makes it to the Sweet 16, maybe that's a team you don't want to play. But on overall, I like this draw for Tennessee. Yes, if it ends up being Kentucky, and that is, if you want to talk statistics here, that's technically the most likely outcome.
Mm-hmm.
It will be the number 2 versus the number 3 seed there. Yeah, you have to play a team that already beat you twice this year. Zach said it. It's tough to beat somebody 3 times. And you nearly beat them every time you played them. And they had to make miracle shot after miracle shot with hands in their face.
And Tennessee shot poorly, especially that first game.
Oh, that first game in Thompson Bowling, you literally, I don't know that you could shoot worse. It was one of the worst shooting days in the history of Tennessee basketball. It was absolutely crazy.
That and that Florida game, that first Florida game was pretty bad too.
Oh God, yeah. So strange that you have one of your better teams ever and had 2 of your worst games ever. That's basketball's a weird sport.
Mm-hmm.
But that's I want to see those guys again. And where would that Sweet 16 be? So you start off, first of all, you're in Lexington. To start out, you play in Rupp Arena. Weirdly, they play in Milwaukee.
Indianapolis, it looks like. Is that right?
Indianapolis. So it's
yes.
That will be so I have been to a Sweet 16 game between Louisville and Kentucky in Indianapolis. That was the Jarnell Stokes year. I went to go see Tennessee play Michigan in that Sweet 16. That was the non-charge against Jarnell Stokes, where you lost to Michigan. And Kentucky fans will take that place over. I mean, it's right next door to Lexington, their border states. And so, but it's also, I assume it would be Lucas Oil. It's also a huge venue, so plenty of Tennessee fans could get in.
Oh, yeah.
But Lexington, I mean, that's barely a 3-hour drive from here. Tennessee fans better take that place over. And UCLA is in there with you. They're barely UCLA fans that go to games in Los Angeles. So you better have that place filled to the rafters. And I love Tennessee's chances to make a Sweet 16 here. I really do. I hope it's against Kentucky for my own selfish purposes. But if it's not, I still like your chances. So from there, let's say you beat Kentucky. The Elite Eight would be Houston, SIU Edwardsville, wherever that is. I don't know. That's the 16 seed. Gonzaga or Georgia? That's an interesting one. And the fact that Houston might have to play Gonzaga in that second round. Gonzaga just won their conference. And
always a tough matchup in the tournament.
Oh, I mean, Mark Few, you want to talk about a guy that has been there and done that. He's just nobody has gotten closer and not won the thing that he has. And then you have Clemson and McNeese. Clemson beat Duke earlier this season. Brad Brownell, good coach. That's a solid basketball team. McNeese State is Will Wade, and yeah, I assume he probably will not be there beyond this year because he just keeps on winning.
And he can pay people now and doesn't have to lie about it.
Yes. Oh, he could give out all of the huge blank offers that he wants to over there at NC State. I feel like NC State would be a good landing spot for Will Wade. And then here it is. Of course, Purdue is right there.
Always.
I mean, would it not just be the Tennesseeist, like Purdue beats Houston in the 16, and then you have to play Purdue for an Elite Eight again?
Man, you lose some dumb, horrible officiating call. Yeah, and we know how that goes.
They still have Fletcher Lawyer and all of those. Zach Edey's not there anymore, thank goodness. But they still have annoying guys that you saw last year. And that that one I'm not excited about. I guess I would like to have revenge against Purdue. I would, genuinely. It would be nice. And I think they're very much more beatable this year than they were a year ago. But still, of course, they do this stuff on purpose. They know exactly what they're doing.
They do, and that's why I'm disappointed, just as a quick aside here, that Arkansas is not playing in Lexington. That is a miss by the committee.
Oh, man.
Just for the record.
What a shame.
I think we all agree there.
Yeah. That it's an interesting set of teams that you could end up playing. But let's assume it's one of those top teams. Houston, that will be a knockdown, drag-out rock fight. They are obviously super defensive heavy. We are defensive heavy. That the final score of that game will be 54-53, and it will be painful to watch, and it'll be ultra physical and draining. And even if you make a Final Four, you're still going to be, your legs are going to be dragging because of that game the next week. But Gonzaga, Georgia, I would feel decent about either of those, and everybody else. I mean, I would feel decent against Purdue. I would love to have a rematch against Purdue, but yeah, I mean, I would feel good about that. Houston is the one that I obviously would be the most concerned about, as you know, that is the thing that makes the most sense here. But I hate saying this, and I'm almost surprised I am saying it. I kind of like Tennessee's draw. I don't. If you can get to that Elite Eight game, and I think you have a very good chance to make a Sweet 16. You have a pretty good chance to make an Elite Eight. I don't know. I like where we're sitting here. It is, in my opinion, a decent spot for Tennessee.
I agree, and you know, it wouldn't shock me if Kentucky doesn't make it to the Sweet 16. That wouldn't be surprising at all, just because, like you said, Mark, he's never won a tournament game. Kentucky's had some stinkers this season as well, so that, it's easier for me to pencil in Tennessee to the Sweet 16 than Kentucky. But even if Kentucky does go, I think you can win that game. Like we said, after that, the Elite Eight, it's anyone's guess as to what happens. The only thing I don't like about this draw is we talked about this last week. I think I was hoping to get in Duke's bracket because I think I would like that matchup. I don't think Duke is prepared to face the physicality of a lot of these SEC teams. I'd really like that matchup for Tennessee, and you would have been playing on a Friday. Alabama got that spot instead of you in Duke's region. Just that extra day off, I think, would have been helpful after playing 3 straight SEC tournament games, including 2 really tough ones on Saturday and Sunday. It would have been nice to not have to play until Friday, cut your travel down by a day. Just another day off. I was really hoping for that for Tennessee. Not surprised at all that it's Thursday. I don't think game times are out there yet, but I'm sure Tennessee will probably play early on Thursday just because. But those are really the only 2 things I don't love about the draw. Everything up into the Elite Eight, I like. Houston's going to be tough. I would have preferred Duke and then that extra day off. That's the biggest thing for me.
Well, and Kyle makes a good point for anybody concerned about Kentucky. They are down 2 of their best players. Lamont Butler re-aggravated the shoulder. Jackson Robinson was already out for the year. And that, if I'm thinking right, that injury to Jackson Robinson happened against Tennessee. Or maybe it was the game before. Either way. So they had 10 losses this season. Freaking beat Kentucky.
It wouldn't surprise me at all if they lose in the second round.
It wouldn't. It was not even slightly.
Yeah.
And so even if you have to play them, go freaking beat these guys. You should have beat them the first 2 times. And if you did beat them the first 2 times, first of all, if you did beat them the first 2 times, you would be a number 1 seed right now.
Mm-hmm.
And they would have been a real close bubble team because they hung their hat on these 2 wins over Tennessee. That was their biggest, nicest wins that they had. And that's just another reason why I am just chomping at the bit to get another shot at these guys, because I am beside myself that you lost those games at all. So just go freaking beat them. And no, there was no excuses back then. There's definitely no excuses now, even though, hey, it might be a little, the crowd for Kentucky will be loud. Oh, no. No excuses. Beat those guys if you end up having to play them. So I will say, unfortunately for that Indianapolis spot, if Kentucky does lose in the second round, there will be way less ticket sales for that round of.
Oh yeah,
for those round of games. Kentucky fans are really the driver there.
If you do make it to the Final Four, it would be Duke's side that you'd match up with, or Alabama. I mean, Alabama could easily come out of there too. But that would be a little bit more favorable, I guess, than having to worry about Florida or Auburn or St. John's.
No, Michigan State.
Yeah.
They're going back. That St. John's is the other side of the bracket. Michigan State is one that you could potentially. They're the number 2 in Auburn's bracket, and nobody wants to play Izzo in March.
Yeah,
the guy can take a high school team to a Final Four somehow. It's when I think about it, it's completely. I like where you're at. This is, again, metrics wise, it's the best team Rick Barnes has ever had, and this is kind of a final hoorah, or whatever you want to call it, for Zakai and for Jemai Mashak. And you've only had him for a year, but Chaz Lanier. And man, we haven't said enough on this show. Justin Gainey this year, that kid deserves so much praise from when he showed up as, hey, my dad's a coach on this team. And you kind of go, okay, well, I don't think we'll be seeing much out of that guy. Congratulations. You get to play for dad. That's really cool. He has been awesome. He today was the primary reason that you hung around at all with this Florida team. What he put up, 24, I think. And he's had other huge games, won you the game at Illinois, and has just been such an incredible surprise. And it's your final go with all of these awesome guys. And maybe people haven't really been talking about it. Maybe with Barnes too. I haven't heard one way or another if he has any intentions to hang it up at all. But it wouldn't surprise me if you just go, "Hey, Zakai's leaving."
Yeah,
Some of my favorite guys ever are leaving.
You're losing a lot of culture guys, and those guys have been the biggest reason that these last 2 years that you've lost guys and you've brought in some key transfers, and they've just meshed pretty quickly, and it's just all kind of flowed. There's no way that happens without guys like Zakai and Meshack. So I could see it. I mean, who knows? I'm not making any prediction. It's totally speculation, that conversation, but he is 70 years old. It's going to happen eventually. And at this point in college basketball, the last 5 or 6 years, it's been one legend after another that's called it quits a little bit before you thought they were going to, especially like somebody like Jay Wright and some of those guys. But Roy Williams, when he did it, you just felt like some of these guys were going to stick around a little bit longer. Barnes has still got the energy. He's still as competitive as ever. His teams are as good as ever. Like you said, it's one of his best teams, if not his best team. But, at some point, it just becomes a real chore, especially right now with NIL, transfer portal, all that stuff. To build a culture is tough. And you had some guys that were really culture setters, and to lose those guys and to really not necessarily start from scratch, but you're going to have a tougher time reinforcing that culture next season than you did this season. I don't know if he's going to have the energy for it. And it might depend on how far he goes here. If he gets to the Final Four, if he wins it all, like if he wins it all, what better way to go out, than with the championship? That would be just the perfect cap to his career. And we'll see what happens. Like I said, it's all speculation. I don't think Barnes even knows at this moment right now, or has even thought about it, to be honest.
And I just want it for him so badly. I want him to be able to go out. First of all, I want him to be able to go out and not have the criticisms of his performance in March. Like, I want him to be able to walk out of Tennessee in his retirement and go like, I did it. You can shut up now. and finally, and he would be saying that to me. I've been one of the guys that said, "Hey, Rick, we would really love to win in March a little bit more." And I want him so badly to just shed that whole narrative. And you have probably your best chance ever here, retirement wise. Who knows? We'll see. Yeah, comment there. So Bert said he thinks Barnes will coach 3 or 4 more years. Cool. That's awesome. I would be happy for.
Yeah,
he will go down as, especially now. I mean, he'll go down as the best guy to ever do it at Tennessee to this point.
The consistency has been
did it better.
Pretty impressive, regardless of postseason results. I mean, you won an SEC tournament, which is huge. I mean, that's nothing to gloss over. But just the consistency year to year, especially in this era. I mean, this is as hard as ever right now to be a consistent winner from year to year with so much roster turnover. And he's really adapted to that. And maybe he goes out and finds some guys that want to buy in and play the way he plays. I mean, at this point, Tennessee does have a reputation for being really physical. You got to play tough defense to play for Rick Barnes. It's no secret. You know what you're getting into. And if you can find guys that buy into that and want to be there and play that style of basketball, then half the battle is already done, when it comes to building the culture. You don't have to talk them into it. So, we'll see. That's something that, we can talk about down the road, or we'll see how it plays out after this tournament.
We will see. I think that's pretty much my full take on Tennessee's draw. We'll see what happens in this opening weekend. You play on Thursday. Of course, we get the quick turnaround there. I didn't even talk about it, but there was some to be said. The fact that you didn't win the SEC title, you kind of wore yourself out almost for no reason. Although I wouldn't say it was for no reason. It's because you got to beat Bruce. Didn't mean a lot, but to Tennessee fans and symbolically, it was very meaningful.
And Texas is always
that too.
It's where Barnes got fired from, and even though it wasn't a great Texas team, the whole real UT thing, I mean, all that is fun too. So it was a good 2 wins in the tournament, and in Florida, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a fun weekend, and now hopefully you'll get to have even more fun here in the tournament. We'll talk about it when it win or lose, whether Tennessee blows it in the first 2 rounds or moves on to the Sweet 16. I will say, again, for my own purposes, I hope this time next week we are talking about Tennessee playing Kentucky in the Sweet 16 and potentially me taking myself up to Indianapolis to watch that game. We'll find out. So let's finish with this, Zach, now that we got basketball out of the way. Baseball. Speaking of Tennessee and Florida, sorry, Florida baseball, good try. They went out there and they swept and didn't just sweep. I mean, it was a butt kicking. They ruled Florida in the second game. And then today you did get behind 4-1. It was, this looks a little dicey. And then they crack off 7 runs and win 7-4. And the pitching, excellent. The hitting, excellent. Still, as we've said to this point, probably the weakest link is your fielding, but even that wasn't that bad. You had 3 errors in 1 inning in today's game. You won by 3 runs. It's like
there's a certain amount of errors that are you just kind of have to deal with in college baseball. It's across the sport. It's not as crisp as the pro game that you might see, so it's going to happen from time to time.
Exactly. I mean, go back and look. If you rewatch the entirety of the Florida State game, the first Florida State game in the College World Series last year, that game was a comedy of errors for both teams and one of the funnest, most crazy, most amazing sporting events Tennessee has ever been involved in. So those things happen. Yeah, you had some errors. You had some fielding errors. It is the weakest link on Tennessee's team, if you can say that it is one. But they still, like this, it wasn't a steamrolling, but Florida is a top 10 team. They are the number 7 team in America, and you disposed of them in as impressive of a fashion as you probably could against a top 10 team.
Yeah, it felt like some 22 vibes in a way. I mean, it's like Tennessee is inevitable, right? Like that was kind of the feeling, especially by today. I mean, that was Saturday was the run rule game, right? It's been a crazy weekend. So yeah. And that game is close. It's 1-0. And then you scored 9 runs in 1 inning. And just like that, I mean, it happened so fast that Florida was probably like, what in the world just happened here? Like, how did we go from potentially having a chance to win this game to we don't even finish the game because we've got run ruled? I mean, it's crazy. And then today as well, being down and then coming back and scoring 6 unanswered runs, I think, or whatever it was.
Yep.
Really insane that you can go and play that kind of baseball 3 games in a row and just never say die. Not even never say die. Just like we're gonna break through. Like it's gonna happen. We don't know when. If it's the 7th inning, 8th inning, 6th inning, whatever it is, it's going to happen. And so far this year, it's happened almost every single game. I mean, it's wild. A lot of season left to play. Who knows how everything goes? It's only March. You got 2 full months of the regular season left. You got to stay healthy. Your pitching needs to stay healthy. Anything can happen, once you get to the end of the season. We saw that in 22, how good that team was, and they didn't even make it to Omaha. But, man, like you couldn't ask for a better start after, if you're worried about a letdown after winning the championship or you're worried about losing all those players and how the new players are going to mesh, like 20-0. I mean, it speaks for itself.
What are you supposed to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you are undefeated. You now have the best start ever for a defending national champion. I think the previous was LSU at 19-0 in like 1997. You just broke that. And it does feel like this could be like that 22 team with less volatility, without the huge personalities that would kind of show themselves and get all the criticism. And while that was really fun, in some sense, it was ultimately your undoing. And I mean, who on this team, maybe Liam Doyle is a little in that direction. He's a big talker. I saw somebody, I think it was on Twitter, and somebody said Liam Doyle hates you just because you're going up to bat. Like it was something like that. Like he just despises you simply because you're standing at the plate in front of him, and he shows it, and he talks his talk. And I it's so much fun. But he's the closest thing to the kind of crazy personalities from that 22 team, I think.
I think,
I mean, just
I think now too, because of that 22 team, I think college baseball's always kind of had some of those characters. I mean, for a long time, but I think even more so after that 22 team, it's not that unique to see some of that behavior anymore across the sport.
No, you saw today. This clip kind of went viral from Michigan's baseball team. The kid made it to first base and he got down and acted like he was snorting cocaine off the first base line. Not sure. I mean, I think it was like Mark Nagy or somebody.
Yes, I was going to mention that.
Yeah, this would have caused congressional hearings if this was Tennessee.
100%.
I think so. I mean, it would have.
If Jordan Beck would have done that, I mean, my goodness.
Yeah, Mike Honcho doing.
They'd have been out there patting him down on the field, like searching his locker, bat bag, all that stuff.
Yeah, but
that is wild. That is the wildest baseball celebration I've ever seen in my entire life. It is
crazy. I mean, and that guy should be thanking Jordan Beck. Jordan Beck walked so that guy could run. You know, like it really, they set that tone in college baseball. But now it really does just feel like these guys, they have plenty of personality and they celebrate when they hit home runs, but it also just kind of feels like they just go out there and they just beat your head in and they leave. Like they're not throwing it in everybody's face. And in some sense now, given the history there, that's even more fun, where you just go, no, we're not going to flaunt it. We're just going to beat the crap out of you. And that's the end of it. That's all. And it's, God.
Their at-bats are so competitive. It never feels like they're, trying to force it, like they're trying to make something happen. They just go out there and compete in the moment. And, it's baseball. It's not always going to work out. You're going to fly out. You're going to miss a pitch, whatever. But they stay composed, man. And they don't miss pitches that often. And that's, if you can consistently do that and stay in that mode for the rest of the season, that's a really tough team to beat, especially with the pitching that Tennessee has.
Well, and I heard an interview, I think it was this week, with Gavin Keelan. I think he was maybe 2 weeks ago. He was on with Tony Basilio, and he talked about how he's improved from his time at Louisville. And he just said that this coaching staff just teaches certain things that he wasn't getting at Louisville, and it shows. I mean, there was some crazy stat, the amount of additional walks he's had. He had more walks in the first some odd games at Tennessee than he had in an entire season at Louisville. And it is a true team effort, not just with the team, but the coaches too. The coaches, I mean, look at Texas A&M right now. Schlossnagle is winning at Texas. And Texas A&M has nearly the same team as last year, and they stink out loud. I mean, they are so bad. Did they lose all three to Alabama? I didn't look.
I don't know. They're probably going to fall out of the top 25 for sure.
I would think so. But their terrible coaching is just absolutely massive. It's crazy. Obviously, we will continue to talk about the baseball team as the season progresses. I think Alabama's coming up
at Tuscaloosa
in Tuscaloosa. Yeah, so that's not going to be easy. I said last week I thought Tennessee was going to drop one of these against Florida. I mean, I got surely this is the weekend where they finally lose a game. I don't want to wish it into existence. I just eventually you got to lose a game, right?
Yeah, I mean, you want to keep winning, but at the same time, I don't know.
Yeah, you kind of want to get that off your back and just go, all right, we lost one. You got us.
It's a lot of pressures. Yeah. It's not about going undefeated. You're not going to go undefeated. It's just not going to happen. That would be, front page news everywhere if that happened. But you get lost out of the way. But for right now, I mean, it doesn't seem to be affecting them. It doesn't seem like they're feeling any pressure at all. So just play their game, and you proved yourself by sweeping Florida. Just winning 2 out of 3, I think would have proved that you're real. I mean, I know there's always questions about the competition you play before SEC tournament play, but I don't even know if I agree with that, because we see so many decent teams like a Texas A&M drop some of these games, a midweek game or against an opponent that's maybe not top 25. So I don't think Tennessee had to prove themselves, but I think they did with this series against Florida. Now you go to Alabama, you win 2 out of 3 on the road. I mean, then the hype just builds from there, and then you gotta deal with the expectations and the noise. And I think that's one thing about the top 25 rankings that you referenced earlier, with D1 keeping LSU in front of Tennessee despite LSU having that loss to Omaha, is that was still kind of like a hey, you're not quite number one yet. No matter how good you're playing, not everybody believes in you. Kind of maybe a little chip on your shoulder. You go unanimous number one after this, and it's like everybody's gunning for you type deal, which I think Tennessee gets that anyway. It's just Tony Vitello's reputation and defending national champs, but it'll add to that a little bit.
I'm excited to see how it goes. Alabama having a very good year so far. Only lost two, 3, 4 games, something, and obviously ripped off wins in College Station. So they're going to be very formidable. I assume that the crowd there, I don't know if Alabama fans actually care about baseball. Maybe they do if they're actually winning. But I got to think the crowd will be pretty good.
Yeah,
there. That's going to be a fun series. We'll find out kind of really where Tennessee's at, finally seeing them play a road SEC. Well, I mean, we saw where they're at this weekend, but we'll see even more where they're at with in an SEC road environment. And we'll talk about that next week. I do like this comment from Ben. He said, Charlie, your point about the baseball team last year is why I have faith in the basketball team this year. You don't have to play perfectly to win a title. Absolutely. You don't. I mean, Tennessee didn't play perfectly against Auburn, and you beat the overall number one seed in the tournament, even if I personally don't agree that they should be the number one overall seed. But that game wasn't pristine and perfect in every single way. You got to make the winning plays. And when it truly counts, Tennessee absolutely did that against Auburn and didn't against Florida. But
yeah, the style of play that Tennessee plays, it kind of allows for that because they muck up games at times and they make it frustrating for the opponent. So you're going to have more opportunities when you play that kind of style. You just got to go out and score, hit your shots. Don't have another Kentucky or Florida game.
Hit open shots, please, 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 please,
and don't foul out key players. That was something that was didn't help against Florida today.
Yeah, Chaz Lanier fouling out with we didn't even bring that up. Fouling out with 8 minutes left or something. I mean,
that game, brutal. And I'm not really complaining about the officials because this is across the sport of college basketball. It's not that I think that it's slanted in favor of one team or another. You notice it more when it goes against the team you're rooting for, but they're so quick to blow the whistle at times. There's been games that Tennessee's played in, like that Duke game in the tournament a couple years ago where they weren't so whistle happy, but it's like the slightest little bit of contact draws a whistle anymore. Just a slight bump. And it's like basketball's a physical game. Like you go watch a game, it's physical. They're beating around down there. It looks physical on TV. It's even more physical when you're up close. I don't love the quick whistles. I don't think it benefits anyone on the court.
It makes it borderline unwatchable at times.
Yes.
I mean, there were parts in that game where it's just like, oh, come on. You got to let them bump a little bit. There has to be some leeway here, guys. I hate that. And usually in the tournament, you get a lighter whistle because it's an entertainment product and they know that. and they don't love the guys having a super quick whistle in the tournament,
and that's definitely something that is always going to work against Tennessee just because of the way they play. If it's a quick whistle, that's going to be tough on Tennessee just because they play so physical and they're trying to push the limit and they're trying to be as physical as they can be without getting fouls called. So they're always going to have some fouls there that are unfortunate and untimely just because of the way they play it. But just don't. If they bump as they're going to the basket, we don't need a stoppage in play.
Exactly. And Eric asks, is there any news from spring practices? I'm ready for football. I would say, Eric, we talked more in depth about that this past Monday. We kind of went into some of the interviews with freshmen that they've had and kind of what we've seen so far. And I'll say next week we just had too much to dive into with the NCAA tournament.
I would say the only thing from last week from spring practice that really stuck out to me is it really feels like who your starting offensive line is probably going to be, just the way everybody talked. That William Satterwright probably going to be your center. Sam Pendleton, the Notre Dame transfer, probably going to be your right guard and your top backup center because he's taking reps at center with David Sanders at right tackle, Lance Hurd at left tackle, and Wendell Moe, however you say his last name, at left guard. If that's the case, I think that's a good thing because we've said from the beginning you want to find your starting five this spring. So hopefully, there's a lot of spring left, a lot of summer left. Got to stay healthy, but if that ends up being your starting five, I think that's a great starting off point for this 2025 team. You can it's got to be good there for everything else to work.
And get it together early so that those guys can really learn where they're at, especially Satterwhite at center, just because it was just such an important position.
There's some good comments about him. Joey Hosley, and Nico both talked about how he knows the offense, he knows the calls, he knew the calls last year.
I'd hope so. At this point,
we'll see. He's gonna be a redshirt freshman. Big shoes he's stepping into. Cooper Mays, held that down for a long time at Tennessee. But hopefully him and Nico are on the same page, and that maybe he has better chemistry with Nico than Cooper did. I mean, Nico and Cooper are only really together that 1 year that they started. He obviously he's probably taken snaps from another center in 23. So you never know. It could be better. It could be an upgrade. We'll see.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I probably still am hanging out in the camp of let's get one or two more guys out of the portal before the season actually starts, just for depth purposes. Yeah.
Good luck finding
the pickings are going to be slim and they're going to be expensive. But
yes, I saw a thing real quick. I saw a thing on ESPN. I can't remember which reporter it was, but it was talking about the spring portal, and a player agent, told ESPN. It's like basically, right, and this kind of, they weren't talking about Ricky Gibson, but this kind of is like the Ricky Gibson situation. It's like if you had a new NIL deal with a guy in December, there almost has to be a retention bonus, or you almost have to double his pay if he's going to be a starter, if he's even considering transferring. So it's a weird world right now where you're having to retain your players twice because of these two transfer windows, and they got to do something about that. That's not going to work.
Unsustainable. Yeah, that cannot continue. Oh boy. Well,
anyway,
that's a very large conversation that we could have. We're already over an hour here. I think that's a show, Zach. This was a good one. This is my favorite time of year. Love it.
Thursday and Friday are the two of the best days of the year.
Oh my gosh, I am so hyped. Let's go win this thing. That's what I'll say. Win this one for Barnes, please. Let's get like I said, get that narrative off of Barnes's back, so he can live in peace and finally, finally be the guy that we've been wanting all this. I mean, he has been the guy that we've wanted all this time. He's been incredible. He's the best coach Tennessee's ever had, frankly. But let's do this. Final four. It's time for a Final Four.
Yes.
Charlie Burris, Zach Reagan, thank you for watching, commenting, tons of comments tonight. You guys were great, as you always are. We could not do this without you. And as I mentioned, next Monday, let's talk about a Tennessee-Kentucky Sweet 16. I'm ready. All right, that's all. We will talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.